You're a penniless dreamer. And dreamers like you don't build empires.
I am leaving.
Arthur?
This must be some kind of joke. Where's the actual owner? Allow me to formally introduce you to Arthur Reeves, founder, majority shareholder of Sole Decision Make Solus Energy.
Son, listen, family looks out for family.
We stopped being family 3 years ago. The day your daughter told me my ideas were a joke and packed her bags for a better offer.
My name is Arthur Reeves, and 3 years ago, my wife told me I would die, broke and forgotten. Today, she walked into my building to beg me for money, and she doesn't even know it's mine. The elevator doors open onto the 40th floor, and I already know who's waiting in my boardroom. My assistant Priya warned me an hour ago. "The Whitmore family," she'd said, her voice careful, like she was handling glass. "They booked the meeting under a shell name. They don't know you're the owner. They think they're pitching to Solus Energy leadership." I told her to let them wait exactly 12 minutes, long enough to feel it, not long enough to walk out. Now I'm standing outside the glass doors of the executive suite, watching 3 people I used to call family rehearse their pitch like actors before a show. Hannah's mother is fixing her lipstick in a pocket mirror. Her father is straightening his tie, the same navy one he wore to our wedding. And Hannah, my ex-wife, is sitting perfectly straight, hands folded, wearing the calm, practiced smile she uses when she wants something. I remember that smile. I used to think it meant she loved me. I push the doors open. The room doesn't just go quiet, it goes still, like someone hit pause on the whole world. My legal team files in behind me, folders in hand, and I walk to the head of the table without looking at any of them yet. I sit down. I turn my chair around slowly. Hannah's mother gasps, a short, sharp sound, like she's been slapped. Her father half rises from his seat, then sits back down like his legs gave out. And Hannah just stares at me, her mouth slightly open, all the color gone from her face, like someone pulled a plug somewhere inside her. "Arthur," she whispers. Just my name, nothing else. Her father recovers first, because rich men always do. He forces a laugh, too loud, too fast. This must be some kind of joke, some assistant playing dress-up. Where's the actual owner of Solus Energy? I don't answer him. I nod to my lawyer, Marcus, who steps forward and slides a folder across the table. The buyout terms they submitted last week. The ones they thought they were sending to a faceless corporation. Now stamped, signed, and addressed directly to me. "Mr. Whitmore," Marcus says, calm as ever, "allow me to formally introduce you to Arthur Reeves, founder, majority shareholder, and sole decision-maker of Solus Energy." Silence. Real silence. The kind that presses on your ears. Hannah's father opens the folder with shaking hands. I watch his eyes scan the page, watch the exact moment he reaches my name printed under "Approved by." His jaw goes tight. Her mother leans over his shoulder, reads it too, and sinks back into her chair like the air left her lungs. But it's Hannah I'm watching. Really watching. She isn't looking at the papers. She's looking at me. And there are tears building in her eyes. Not the practiced, convenient kind she used to produce on command during our marriage, back when tears were a tool she used to get her way. These look different. These look like they're choking her on the way out. "Arthur," she says again, quieter this time, like she's talking to a ghost. You own this? All of it?" I built this company from a folding table in a one-room apartment with water stains on the ceiling. I built it during the 18 months after you left, when I stopped sleeping and started working, because working was the only thing that didn't hurt. I built it out of the same worthless dreams you laughed at 3 years ago. I don't say any of that out loud. I just look at her, and I let my voice come out flat, completely empty. No anger, no satisfaction, nothing for her to hold on to. Yes, I say. All of it. Her father tries one more time, sliding into the tone he probably used in 100 boardrooms before this one. Smooth, persuasive, a little desperate underneath it. Arthur, son, listen. We can restructure this deal. Family looks out for family, doesn't it? We stopped being family 3 years ago, I say, still flat, still calm. The day your daughter told me my ideas were a joke and packed her bags for a better offer. Her mother's face goes rigid, her father's mouth snaps shut, and Hannah puts a hand over her mouth like she's trying to hold something in, and a single sob escapes anyway, cracking through the silence of the room like glass breaking somewhere far away. I don't feel triumphant. I don't feel the satisfaction I imagined I would, all those nights I pictured this exact moment. I just feel tired. And something else underneath the tired. Something I don't have a name for yet. Marcus clears his throat. The buyout offer is declined. Solus Energy is not interested in acquiring Whitmore Holdings under current terms. We'll have security escort you out. Her father stands, sputtering something about lawyers, about consequences, about how I'll regret this. Her mother grabs her purse, refusing to make eye contact with anyone. But Hannah doesn't move right away. She stays in her seat 1 extra second, staring at me across the long table, tears sliding down her face without her even trying to wipe them away. For just a moment, one single, unguarded moment, I don't see the woman who destroyed me. I see the girl who used to sit across from me at a cracked kitchen table, listening to me talk about impossible ideas like they actually mattered. Then her father grabs her arm, and the moment breaks, and I watch her walk out of my building like a stranger. Watching the doors close behind her, something inside me pulls loose, like a thread catching on a nail. And before I can stop it, I'm 3 years back, in a different room, a different life. Our apartment was small. Rain always found the gap in the window frame, and there was a permanent damp patch on the ceiling shaped like a country I never bothered to identify. We couldn't afford much. We could barely afford the apartment itself, but I remember thinking back then that none of it mattered because I had Hannah, and I had an idea I believed could change everything. I remember the night clearly because it was the last good night before everything fell apart. I'd spread my blueprints across the kitchen table, hand-drawn, messy, covered in eraser marks and coffee rings. Sketches of a solar collector design I'd been working on for over a year, scribbled during breaks at my dead-end engineering job, refined at 2 in the morning when Hannah was asleep and the apartment was quiet enough for me to think. "Look," I said, sliding the papers toward her, practically vibrating with excitement. "If I can get the angle of the panels right, if I can solve this energy loss problem here," I tapped the page, "this could actually work. This could be bigger than anything the big firms are doing right now." She looked at the drawings for a long moment. I remember holding my breath, waiting for her to see what I saw. Then she laughed. Not a cruel laugh, not at first. More of a tired, disbelieving huff, like I'd told a joke that wasn't very funny. "Arthur," she said, shaking her head, "you barely make enough to cover rent. You want to spend money we don't have on a science project?" She picked up one of the pages, glanced at it like it was homework she'd already graded and found lacking, and set it back down. "This is a hobby. It's not a plan. You need to grow up and think about our actual future." I tried to explain it again, tried to make her understand what I saw when I looked at those lines and numbers. She just kept shaking her head, arms crossed, until finally she said the words that would replay in my mind for the next 3 years. "You're a dreamer, Arthur. A penniless dreamer. And dreamers like you don't build empires. They die broke, wondering what happened." I remember sitting very still after she said it, staring at the blueprints like they'd suddenly gotten smaller. I didn't know that was only the beginning of that night. Because a few hours later, after a silence so heavy I thought it might swallow the whole apartment, she sat down across from me again. Not to apologize, but to tell me something else entirely. "I've been seeing someone," she said, not even looking at me. "His name is Damon. He's a manager at Weston Corp. He has a real career, Arthur. A real life. The kind of life I actually deserve." I remember the strange, hollow calm that settled over me as she spoke, like watching a car crash from far away, distant enough that it didn't feel real yet. She talked about the affair like she was reading a grocery list, how long it had been going on, how Damon could give her security, comfort, a future. All the things, she said, I would never be able to provide chasing paper dreams in a run-down apartment. She packed that same night. I remember watching her fold clothes into a suitcase with the same efficiency she used for everything else in her life, like leaving me was simply another item to check off a list. She didn't cry, she didn't look back much. At the door, she paused for half a second, maybe expecting me to beg her to stay, maybe expecting some kind of scene. I didn't shout. I didn't cry either, not that night. That came much later, alone, on nights I don't like to remember. I just sat at the kitchen table where my blueprints were still spread out, the ink slightly smudged where her coffee cup had left a ring on one corner. When she was gone, I gathered the papers slowly, careful not to tear them, rolling them into a tight tube like they were something precious. I left the apartment key on the counter, right where she used to leave her sunglasses. I didn't leave a note. There wasn't anything left to say. I walked out into the rain that night with nothing but a rolled-up stack of hand-drawn dreams under my arm, and I remember thinking, clearly, coldly, that I had two choices. I could let her words become true, or I could make them into a lie. I chose the second one. Every late night after that, every skipped meal, every rejected investor meeting, every moment I wanted to quit, I thought about that laugh. Not with rage, not exactly. More like fuel. A quiet, steady kind of fire that never really went out, even when everything else in my life did. Back in the present, standing in my boardroom with the echo of her sob still hanging in the air, I realized something uncomfortable. I never built Solus Energy to prove her wrong. I built it because some stubborn part of me never stopped believing what I told her that rainy night. Blueprints spread across a cheap kitchen table. That dreams, even penniless ones, could still become something real. I just never expected to see her walk back into it, 3 years later, begging for scraps of the very thing she once laughed at. The rest of the day moves like static. Meetings I attend but don't remember, emails I answer without reading them twice. By the time I head down to the underground parking garage that evening, my mind is still stuck in that rainy apartment 3 years ago, still hearing Hannah's laugh echo against my ribs. I almost don't notice the raised voices near the far end of the garage, close to where the visitor spots are. I almost keep walking toward my car, but something in the tone, sharp, cornered, desperate, makes me slow down and duck behind a concrete pillar before I even decide to. It's the Whitmores, all 3 of them, standing beside their car under a flickering fluorescent light, and they clearly think they're alone. "You had one job today," her father snaps, his voice low but vicious. the polished boardroom charm completely stripped away. One job. Walk in there, remind him what you two used to have, and soften him up before the negotiation even started. Instead, you just sat there like a mute.
What did you want me to do?
Hannah's voice cracks, thin and raw.
Throw myself at him in front of his lawyers?
If that's what it takes. Her mother's voice is colder than her father's, more clinical, like she's discussing a business strategy instead of her own daughter. You know how to work a man like Arthur. You did it for 2 years before you left him. It's not exactly a difficult skill to relearn. I go very still behind the pillar, my hand gripping the cold concrete edge. He's not some project, Hannah says, and there's something new in her voice now. Not just fear of her parents, but something closer to disgust. He's a person you two destroyed our company trying to compete with, and now you want me to, what, seduce him? Manipulate him into forgetting 3 years of pain so you can save yourselves? We're not asking you to marry him again, her father says, sharper now, clearly running out of patience. We're asking you to use what you have, your history, your access. Get close enough that he lowers his guard and let us handle the rest. This company is bleeding money, Hannah. If Solace doesn't buy us out or invest, we lose everything. The house, the company your grandfather built, everything. So the plan is to weaponize an ex-marriage, Hannah says, and I hear her voice shaking now, not from fear, but from something closer to fury. Weaponize me against a man I already destroyed once. Don't be so dramatic, her mother cuts in. You didn't destroy him. Clearly, he's done quite well for himself. A short, bitter laugh. Frankly, we should be thanking you. If you hadn't left him, none of this— Enough! Hannah's voice cracks like a whip, silencing both of them. For a second, nobody speaks. Then she continues, quieter but somehow harder. You know what I keep thinking about? That night I left him. He didn't yell. He didn't beg. He just sat there with those ridiculous hand-drawn blueprints of his, completely silent, while I told him he'd die broke and forgotten. Her voice wavers. And today I watched him turn that chair around, and I realized he built an empire out of exactly what I laughed at. And you two want me to go back and use the one wound I actually caused, just to save your bank accounts? Watch your tone, her father warns. No. The word comes out sharp, final. I won't do it. I already sold my dignity once for a better future with Damon, remember? How did that turn out? He left the second Weston Corp had layoffs, and he needed someone with actual money behind them. I'm not doing that again. Not to Arthur. Not for either of you. Then you're choosing to let this family collapse, her mother says, voice icy. Over some guilt trip about a man who clearly doesn't even want you back. Maybe, Hannah says, and her voice finally breaks fully, tears bleeding into every word. Maybe I deserve to lose everything too. But I'm not doing this. Figure out your own mess. I'm done being your solution. She turns and walks away from them, heels echoing sharply against the concrete. And for a moment, I think she's heading straight toward my hiding spot. My pulse spikes. But she veers toward the elevator instead, wiping furiously at her face, shoulders shaking with the effort of holding herself together. Her parents stand by their car for a long moment, muttering to each other in tones too low for me to catch, before finally getting in and driving off, tires screeching slightly against the concrete. I stay behind the pillar, even after the garage goes quiet again, my heart pounding in a way that has nothing to do with fear. I came down here expecting to feel nothing when I saw her again, or at most, cold satisfaction watching her family scramble. Instead, I feel something far more complicated twisting in my chest. Because the woman I just heard wasn't performing. Her fury wasn't a strategy. Her refusal wasn't a negotiating tactic designed for an audience she didn't know was listening. For 3 years, I built a version of Hannah in my mind, calculating, hollow, someone who traded love for comfort without a second thought. It made the pain simpler. It made hating her easier. But the woman who just walked away from her own parents, refusing to weaponize her own history against me, doesn't fit that version at all. I lean back against the pillar, staring at the empty space where her car used to be. And for the first time in 3 years, I let myself consider something dangerous. What if her remorse is real? I don't see Hannah for 2 days after the parking garage. I tell myself it's better this way, that whatever I overheard doesn't change anything, that a woman's private fury at her parents doesn't erase a wedding ring she stopped wearing the moment someone richer looked her way. I bury myself in work, the way I always have, and I almost convince myself it's working. Then, on the 3rd night, security calls my cell phone a little after 10. "Mr. Reeves, sorry to bother you at home," says the guard, a steady older man named Owens, who's worked the night shift since before Solis Energy had its own building. "There's a woman in the archives wing, says her name's Hannah Whitmore. She's not on any employee list, but she's not exactly trespassing either. That floor's public record access, open to anyone filing a request. She's been in there almost 2 hours, going through old filing cabinets." I sit up straighter on my couch. "Is she causing any trouble?" "No, sir. If anything, she looks like she's crying more than causing trouble." A pause. "Wanted to check if you wanted her escorted out or left alone." I think about it for exactly 3 seconds. "Leave her. I'll come down myself." The archives wing occupies the ground floor of an older annex building attached to Solis Energy's main tower, a relic from before I bought the whole block. Kept intentionally old-fashioned because some of our earliest corporate filings and patents exist only in physical form, scanned copies stored alongside the originals as a legal backup. It's rarely visited except by lawyers doing due diligence or historians writing about the solar boom companies of the last decade. When I step through the heavy door, I find Hannah sitting on the floor between 2 open filing cabinets, several folders spread around her like she gave up on a desk entirely. Her hair is pulled back messily, sleeves pushed up, and there are tear tracks dried on her cheeks, catching the dim overhead light. She doesn't hear me at first. She's staring down at a single yellowed document like it's rewritten her entire understanding of the world. "Looking for something specific?" I say quietly. "Or just torturing yourself for fun?" She jumps, nearly knocking over a stack of folders, and scrambles half upright before catching herself.
Arthur, I didn't... Owen said I could...
"I know. I told him to leave you." I lean against the doorframe, arms crossed. "What are you doing down here, Hannah?" For a long moment, she just looks at me, like she's deciding whether to lie. Then she looks back down at the document in her lap and says quietly,
"I was trying to understand how you built all this. From nothing. I thought... I don't know what I thought. That maybe if I understood the beginning, I could understand what I actually walked away from."
I don't say anything. I just wait. She lifts the paper toward me, hand trembling slightly.
"I found the original patent filing. The very first one. From back when this company was 3 people in a rented office space. Before any of the investors, before any of it."
I already know what it says. I filed it myself. But I let her say it anyway.
"It's registered as the H.A. Grid,"
she says, voice barely above a whisper.
H.A. Hannah and Arthur.
Her eyes lift to mine, wide and glassy.
"You named your very first patent after both of us, after I'd already left."
I feel my jaw tighten, but I keep my voice level. "It wasn't sentimental, if that's what you're hoping. It was practical. The design itself came from those blueprints you saw that night, the ones you called a hobby. I built the actual working prototype using the same core concept. Some habits are hard to break, including the initials I'd already been using in my private notebook for over a year before you left.
But you kept it, she says, like that single fact undoes something in her. After everything, you built your entire empire on top of a name that still had me in it. I built it on top of an idea, I correct, sharper than I mean to. The idea existed before you left. Hannah, it would have existed even if you'd stayed. I didn't rename the file out of some torch I was carrying for you. I just never had a reason to change it. But even as I say it, I feel the lie sitting uneasy in my chest, because we both know that's not entirely true. There were 100 moments over 3 years I could have renamed that patent file, updated the internal designation, erased the initials with a single email to legal. I never did. Some part of me, the part I've spent 3 years refusing to examine too closely, let it stay exactly as it was. Hannah wipes at her face with the back of her hand, laughing softly, brokenly. I spent years telling myself you must hate me completely, that there was nothing left of what we had, that I destroyed it so thoroughly there was no trace. And then I find this. She gestures at the paper. Proof that even after I broke your heart and laughed at your dreams, the very first thing you built with those dreams still had my name stitched into it. Don't read too much into a filing code, I say, but the words come out quieter than I intend, less certain. She looks up at me, eyes red-rimmed but steady now, something resolute settling over her features. I'm not asking you to forgive me, Arthur. I know I don't deserve that, not after everything. Not after what my parents tried to use me for 2 days ago. Not after what I did to you 3 years ago. She carefully folds the old document and sets it back exactly where she found it, like it's something sacred she has no right to keep. I just needed to know the truth, even if it hurts, even if it changes nothing. She stands, brushing dust off her skirt, and walks past me toward the exit, close enough that I catch the faint, familiar scent of her perfume, the same one she wore 3 years ago, somehow untouched by everything that's happened since. At the door, she pauses, one hand on the frame, not quite looking back at me. For what it's worth, she says quietly, I'm sorry, Arthur. Not the kind of sorry I'll say to get something, just sorry for all of it. Then she's gone, and I'm left standing alone in the archive room, staring at a filing cabinet that holds 3 years of buried feelings I thought I'd already put to rest. 2 weeks pass, and I don't hear from Hannah at all. No calls, no messages, no attempts to reach out through mutual contacts or company channels. Part of me wonders if the archive room was the last of it, whatever it was, and that she's simply gone back to whatever life exists for her outside my orbit. I tell myself that's fine. I tell myself a lot of things these days that I don't entirely believe. When the pressure of running Solus Energy gets to be too much, board meetings, investor calls, the endless, grinding weight of being responsible for thousands of employees and a company worth more than I ever let myself imagine, I do the same thing I've done for years. I drive out to the industrial outskirts of the city, past the warehouses and shuttered factories, to a small garage unit I never sold. It's not much, a single-room workshop with a rolling metal door, cracked concrete floors, and a workbench I built myself out of scrap lumber, back when I couldn't afford a proper one. This is where I built my first working prototype of the solar collector, the one that eventually became the foundation for everything Solus Energy is today. I could afford 100 better places to think by now. I keep this one anyway. Tonight, rain is hammering the metal roof when I pull up, the kind of steady downpour that turns the whole street into a river of reflected streetlights. I let myself in, flip on the single bare bulb hanging over the workbench, and just stand there for a while, listening to the rain and letting my mind go quiet. I don't hear the knock at first. It's soft, almost swallowed by the storm. When it comes again, I turn toward the door, confused.
Nobody knows about this place except me. Nobody's ever known. I open the rolling door part way, and there's Hannah, standing in the downpour without an umbrella, soaked completely through, her hair plastered flat against her face. She's shivering, arms wrapped around herself, and for a moment, neither of us says anything. "How did you find this place?" I ask, genuinely stunned.
I hired someone,
She admits, voice trembling from the cold.
a private investigator. I know how that sounds. I needed to see you somewhere that wasn't a boardroom or an archive room. Somewhere real.
I should tell her to leave. I should remind her that I don't owe her access to any part of my life, real or otherwise. Instead, I step back and let her in out of the rain, because some things are apparently harder to refuse than I'd like to admit. She stands just inside the doorway, dripping onto the concrete, looking around at the cluttered workbench, the old tools hanging on a pegboard, the faded blueprints tacked to the wall, some of the very same ones she laughed at 3 years ago, now yellowed with age, but still there.
This is it.
She says softly, almost to herself.
This is where you actually built it.
Every late night, every weekend, for almost a year, I say, while working a full-time job just to keep the lights on. She's quiet for a long moment, staring at the blueprints on the wall like she's looking at ghosts. Then she reaches into her coat, soaked through, clinging to her, and pulls out a folded, water-stained envelope, holding it out toward me with a hand that's shaking, though I can't tell if it's from the cold or something else.
I'm not here to ask you for anything, she says quickly, before I can even respond. Not money, not forgiveness, not a second chance. I know I don't have the right to ask for any of that. I just needed to give you this.
I take the envelope carefully, feeling the dampness already seeping through the paper. What is it?
A letter,
She says.
I wrote it 3 different times before I got it right. Please, read it whenever you want. Not now, if you don't want to. I just needed you to have it.
I open it slowly, careful not to tear the soaked paper. Her handwriting is shaky in places, like she'd been crying while writing it, the ink slightly smeared in a few spots. I scan just the first few lines.
Arthur, I don't expect you to forgive me, and I'm not writing this hoping that you will. I'm writing because I need you to know that everything I said that night was a lie I told myself so I wouldn't have to admit I was terrified. Terrified of struggling.
Terrified of believing in something as fragile as a dream. I called you a penniless dreamer because it was easier than admitting I didn't have the courage to dream alongside you. I stop reading, my throat tightening in a way I don't want to examine too closely, and look back up at her. She's already stepping back toward the open door, rain visible behind her like a curtain.
I don't need an answer, she says, voice cracking slightly. I don't need anything from you, Arthur. I just needed you to finally know the truth, even 3 years too late.
Hannah,
Please.
she holds up a hand, stopping me.
Whatever you decide to do with that letter, burn it, keep it, ignore it completely. I'll accept it. I just couldn't keep carrying the lie anymore.
Before I can find any words at all, she turns and walks back out into the rain, disappearing down the dark street without looking back once, leaving me standing alone in my old workshop, holding a soaked letter that somehow feels heavier than anything I've carried in 3 years. I look down at the blueprints on the wall, the same ones, the exact same lines she once called worthless, and then back at the letter in my trembling hands. For the first time since she walked back into my life, I don't know what I believe anymore. I don't burn the letter. I don't answer it either. Instead, I fold it carefully and place it in the top drawer of my workbench, next to the original hand-drawn blueprints. And for 3 weeks, I try to convince myself that's the end of the matter. One more piece of the past filed away instead of confronted. It isn't the end of anything. The trouble starts on a Tuesday afternoon when my head of security, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Devi, requests an urgent private meeting. She closes my office door behind her, which she never does unless something's seriously wrong. "We have a problem," she says without preamble. "One of our senior engineers on the Grid 2 team, Marcus Feld, has been flagged by IT for unusual activity. Late-night file access to the updated prototype schematics. Copies moved to an external drive 3 separate times over the past week." My stomach tightens. Grid 2 is our next-generation solar collector design. Years of research, worth an enormous amount to any competitor who could get their hands on it before we file the full patent. Feld has clearance for that project. Why would he need to move files externally? That's the concerning part. Devi slides a folder across my desk. We ran a deeper background check after the flags came in. Feld was quietly let go from a rival firm 2 years ago after allegations of falsifying test data. Allegations that never became public because he settled quietly and signed an NDA. He's been with us 8 months, clean record on paper, good reviews. But 8 months ago is also right around when Whitmore Holdings started publicly struggling. I feel something cold settle in my chest. You think he was planted? I think it's worth investigating before he finishes whatever he's doing, Devi says grimly. If those schematics leave the building intact, a rival firm could shortcut years of our R&D. We need to move carefully, legally, quietly, until we have enough to act. I spend the rest of that day and most of the next distracted, running scenarios in my head, wondering how deep this actually goes. I don't have to wonder for long. Late that same evening, my phone buzzes with an unfamiliar number. I almost let it go to voicemail. Something makes me answer. Arthur. Hannah's voice, breathless, panicked in a way I've never heard from her. You need to listen to me right now. I don't have much time. Hannah, what's... My father is going to steal your schematics. The words tumble out fast, tangled with fear. Tonight, I overheard him on the phone an hour ago. He's been in contact with someone inside your company for months, paying them to copy your Grid 2 files. He's planning to sell them to Halden Renewables, your biggest competitor, in exchange for enough cash to cover Whitmore Holdings' debts before the quarter ends. My blood runs cold. How do you know this? I was in the study getting a book, and his door was cracked. I heard him say the name. Marcus, I think, or Feld, something like that. And he mentioned the loading dock, tonight, midnight, some kind of final handoff before the drive gets couriered out. Her voice cracks. Arthur, I know I have no right to warn you about anything after everything that's happened, but I can't just sit here and let him destroy the one thing you built out of nothing. Not again. I'm already standing, already reaching for my jacket. Hannah, listen to me. Do not go anywhere near this. Call the police, tell them what you heard, and stay home. I'll call my head of security right now. I can't just stay home, she says, and there's a new steel in her voice underneath the fear. If I call the police with secondhand information from an overheard phone call, they'll want evidence, timelines, probably a warrant. That takes time you might not have. I'm already in my car. I'm driving to your building right now. Hannah! I have to do this, Arthur. Her voice wavers but doesn't break. I've spent 3 years letting my parents use me, manipulate me, turn me into someone I actually became ashamed of. I'm not letting them destroy your life's work while I sit safely at home pretending I don't know what's happening. Not this time. The line goes dead before I can argue further. I call Devi immediately, my hands unsteady as I relay everything Hannah told me. She's already moving before I finish the sentence, mobilizing security to the loading dock, quietly pulling Marcus Feld's badge access, coordinating with building surveillance to monitor movement without tipping anyone off too early. What about Hannah Whitmore? Devi asks, voice tight with focus. You said she's driving there herself? Yes, I say, already grabbing my car keys, dread pooling low in my stomach. and I have a very bad feeling she's not planning to just wait in the parking lot. I remember the woman I overheard in the garage weeks ago, refusing to let her parents weaponize her against me. I remember the woman who tracked me down through a private investigator just to hand-deliver a letter she didn't expect anything back from. I remember her voice just now on the phone. Not manipulative, not performing for an audience. Just afraid and determined in equal measure. Whatever her father is planning tonight, I have a sinking certainty that Hannah isn't going to sit back and simply let it happen. And as I speed through the city towards Solace Energy, rain starting to streak my windshield in fat, heavy drops, I realize I'm not just afraid for my company anymore. I'm afraid for her. The drive to Solace Energy takes 11 minutes. It feels like an hour. Rain hammers my windshield the entire way, streetlights smearing into long yellow streaks as I push well past the speed limit, my phone propped against the dashboard with Devi's voice crackling through updates every few minutes.
Feld just badged into the R&D wing, she says. He's alone so far, no sign of anyone else.
Any sign of Hannah's car?
Not yet. Security's watching the main entrance and the loading dock. If she shows up, we'll see her.
I grip the steering wheel tighter, jaw clenched, torn between hoping she got stuck in traffic somewhere safe and dreading the alternative, that she's already closer than any of us realize. By the time I screech into the underground garage and abandon my car in a spot that isn't technically a parking spot, my phone buzzes again. Devi's voice is sharper now, edged with urgency.
Feld's moving toward the loading dock. He's got something under his jacket. Looks like an external drive. Security's converging now.
I'm 3 minutes out, I say, already running toward the stairwell instead of waiting for the elevator.
Arthur!
Devi's voice catches, and something in her tone makes my stomach drop.
There's a second person down here. A woman. She just came through the loading dock side entrance.
Is it Hannah?
I can't tell yet. The cameras...
A burst of static, shouting in the background, something crashing.
Arthur, get down here now!
I don't remember most of the stairs. I remember bursting through the heavy steel door into the loading dock, chest heaving, rain-soaked from the run across the garage, and freezing at what I find. 2 security guards have Marcus Feld pinned against a concrete support column, his hands zip-tied in front of him, an external hard drive lying on the ground a few feet away where it must have been knocked loose. He's shouting something about lawyers, about this being a misunderstanding, but nobody's listening to him. Because standing just a few feet away, chest heaving, hair wild and soaked from the rain, is Hannah. There's a long, jagged scratch running down her forearm, blood mixing with rainwater and dripping steadily onto the concrete floor. Her sleeve is torn at the shoulder. She's breathing hard, staring down at the drive on the ground like she can't quite believe it's actually there. Like the adrenaline hasn't fully drained out of her system yet. Hannah! Her name comes out of me rough, half shout, half disbelief, and I'm crossing the loading dock before I even decide to move. She looks up at me, and for a moment her face crumples. Not from pain exactly, but from something closer to relief, like she's been holding herself together purely through momentum, and now that momentum has nowhere left to go.
He was already at the door,
she says, voice shaking, words tumbling out too fast.
I saw him heading for a car outside the loading dock with the drive, and I didn't think, Arthur. I just ran at him. I grabbed his arm and he shoved me off and I fell, and then I just tackled him before he could reach the car door, and he scratched me trying to get free, and I wouldn't let go of the drive even when he...
Hannah, stop, you're bleeding. I reach for her arm and she flinches slightly, more from the sting than from me, letting me examine the scratch, which is shallow but ugly, already starting to bruise around the edges. Davy appears beside us, radio in hand, quickly assessing the scene with practiced efficiency.
Feld secure. We recovered the drive intact. Looks like the transfer never completed before Miss Whitmore intercepted him.
She glances at Hannah's arm.
We need to get that looked at. I'll call medical.
I'm fine,
Hannah says automatically, the old reflex of someone used to minimizing her own pain.
It's just a scratch.
It's not fine, I say, more sharply than I mean to. still holding her arm gently, still staring at the blood running down toward her wrist. "You could have been seriously hurt. He could have had a weapon, could have shoved you into traffic, could have—" I stop myself, aware that my voice has climbed several registers higher than I intended. She looks up at me, and despite everything, the rain, the blood, the exhaustion clearly written across her face, there's something steady in her eyes. "Why did you do this?" I ask quietly. Once medical arrives and starts cleaning the wound, once Feld has been led away by security still shouting about lawyers, once the loading dock has emptied out enough that it feels almost like we're alone. "You could have just called the police and stayed home. Why risk your safety like this? For a company that isn't even yours anymore?" Hannah is quiet for a long moment, watching the medic wrap gauze around her forearm, wincing slightly at the antiseptic.
"Because I already let someone destroy your dreams once," she says finally, voice low, raw, stripped of any performance. "I did it myself, 3 years ago, with words instead of hands, but the damage was just as real. I wasn't going to stand by and let my own father finish the job with a stolen hard drive." Her eyes lift to mine, glassy but fierce. "Especially not when it's my own bloodline doing it this time. I couldn't let him become the second person who destroyed everything you built. Not while I had any way to stop it." I don't have a response ready for that. I just stand there in the fluorescent light of the loading dock, rain still audible against the metal roof somewhere above us, watching this woman who broke my heart 3 years ago bleed from an injury she earned, protecting the very dreams she once laughed at. For the first time since she walked back into my life, I don't feel the cold, careful distance I've spent 3 years building around myself. I just feel grateful she's still standing here at all. The Solus Green Tech Summit is the biggest event of the year for my company. The public unveiling of the Grid 2 technology, the culmination of everything I've built since that rainy night 3 years ago. Reporters from every major outlet filled the city convention center, camera crews lined up along the back wall, investors and industry leaders seated in rows that stretch further than I can easily count from the stage. I hadn't expected Hannah to be here. After the loading dock, after the stitches on her arm and the police report about her father's attempted theft, she'd quietly stepped back, giving me space to process everything that had happened. We hadn't spoken much in the 2 weeks since, a few brief messages checking on her arm, nothing more. I assumed, given the criminal charges now pending against her father for corporate espionage, that the Whitmores would want nothing to do with anything connected to me, least of all a public event covered by every news outlet in the city. I assumed wrong. I'm midway through my keynote, walking the audience through the technical breakthroughs of Grid 2, when a commotion starts near the back entrance. I glance up from my notes just in time to see security trying, and failing, to quietly redirect 3 familiar figures pushing past the check-in table. Hannah's parents, flanked by 2 reporters they must have personally invited, storm down the center aisle with the practiced fury of people who've decided public humiliation is preferable to quiet defeat. "Arthur Reeves owes this family a settlement," her father shouts, loud enough that the microphones near the stage pick it up, loud enough that every camera in the room swings toward him instantly. "He destroyed our company through predatory buyout tactics and stole proprietary designs that originated with Whitmore Holdings." It's a lie, and a clumsy one, but lies delivered loudly enough in front of cameras have a way of becoming headlines, regardless of truth. I feel my jaw tighten, feel 3 years of careful, deliberate composure threatening to crack in front of every journalist in the city. Then I see Hannah. She's standing near the entrance, having clearly followed her parents in, wearing a simple dark dress instead of anything designed for a press event. Her face is pale but set, jaw locked with a determination I recognize now. The same look she had the night she tackled a thief in the rain. She walks straight down the center aisle, past her sputtering parents, past the confused security guards uncertain whether to intervene, and climbs the short steps onto the stage before anyone can stop her.
Hannah, what are you? Her mother starts, voice sharp with warning. Hannah ignores her completely. She steps up beside me at the podium, and for a moment, the entire convention center goes eerily quiet. Hundreds of camera flashes going off in a steady, disorienting rhythm.
My name is Hannah Whitmore,
she says into the microphone, voice steadier than I expect, carrying clearly across the silent room.
and I need to say something publicly, because my family has spent weeks trying to control this narrative through private threats and now, apparently, public theater.
Her father starts to protest, but she talks over him, not raising her voice, just refusing to yield the floor.
3 years ago, I left my husband because I didn't believe in his vision, and I told him he'd die broke chasing an impossible dream. Her voice wavers slightly but doesn't break. I was wrong, completely, catastrophically wrong. And rather than admit that, my parents have spent the past 2 months trying to manipulate both of us. First by pressuring me to use our history to soften him for a buyout, and then, when that failed, by orchestrating corporate espionage that resulted in criminal charges currently pending against my father. Gasps ripple through the crowd. Cameras click furiously. Her mother's face has gone rigid with fury and something like panic. I am formally and permanently resigning from Whitmore Holdings, Hannah continues, effective immediately. I want to be clear that this isn't about protecting Arthur, or seeking his forgiveness, or repairing anything between us. This is about finally taking responsibility for my own choices, instead of hiding behind my family's greed. She turns slightly, addressing the room directly now. I disowned my integrity once to protect my parents' comfort. I'm not doing it again. Her father shouts something about betrayal, about family loyalty, but security finally moves in, gently but firmly escorting both parents toward the exit, as reporters shout overlapping questions that go mostly unanswered. Hannah stands beside me at the podium for a moment longer, breathing hard, hands trembling slightly at her sides, the full weight of what she just did clearly settling over her in real time.
I'm sorry for the interruption,
She says quietly into the microphone, voice finally cracking just slightly.
This is Arthur's moment, not mine. Thank you for your time.
She steps back from the podium and starts toward the stage stairs, clearly intending to disappear into the crowd before the aftermath fully catches up with her. I don't let her. Wait, I say, reaching out and catching her hand before she can descend the steps. The room is still buzzing, cameras still flashing, but for a moment it feels like just the two of us standing there.
Arthur, you don't have to,
she starts, eyes wide, clearly bracing for rejection in front of hundreds of witnesses. I know I don't have to, I say quietly, just loud enough for the microphone to catch. I'm choosing to. The room goes very quiet again, waiting. I don't say anything else on that stage. There's nothing to explain to a room full of reporters, no need to turn 3 years of pain into a headline.
I just release Hannah's hand, let her walk down the steps on her own terms, and finish my keynote like a man who still has a company to run, even as my mind stays fixed on the woman disappearing into the crowd.
It takes 2 months before either of us is ready to say anything more. 2 months of her father's legal proceedings playing out quietly in the background. A plea deal, restitution, a suspended sentence that keeps him out of prison but ends his career permanently. 2 months of watching Hannah, from a careful distance, rebuild something resembling an independent life. She takes a small apartment across town, nothing like the penthouse she grew up in. She starts working, of all things, at a non-profit focused on renewable energy access for low-income communities. Unpaid at first, then part-time, building something from nothing the same way I once did. I don't reach out during those 2 months, and she doesn't either.
I think we both understand, without needing to say it, that whatever comes next has to be built slowly, deliberately, without the pressure of company scandals or public spectacles pushing us toward decisions neither of us has actually earned yet. Then, on a quiet Saturday morning in early autumn, I text her a single line. There's a bench overlooking the harbor,
Meet me there at noon, if you want. She's already sitting on it when I arrive, wrapped in a plain wool coat, watching the water instead of checking her phone. No reporters, no lawyers, no parents lurking somewhere with an agenda. Just Hannah, alone on a park bench, looking smaller and more real than she ever did across a boardroom table. I sit down beside her, leaving a careful, respectful distance between us, and for a while, neither of us says anything at all.
The harbor stretches out below the small coastal park, boats drifting lazily against a backdrop of the city skyline. Solus Energy's headquarters visible as a distant glass tower among dozens of others.
I keep thinking about that night, Hannah says eventually, still watching the water. The blueprints on the kitchen table. What I said to you. Her voice is steady, but there's real grief underneath it. 3 years compressed into a handful of words. I've apologized so many times now, in so many ways, and I still don't think it's enough. It's not about being enough, I say quietly. I stopped keeping score a while ago. Somewhere between the archive room and the loading dock, honestly. She turns to look at me then, eyes searching mine carefully, like she's trying to determine whether hope is actually safe to feel yet. So where does that leave us? I take a slow breath, choosing my words carefully, because I owe her, owe both of us, complete honesty instead of comfortable fiction. I'm not going to pretend the last 3 years didn't happen. I'm not going to pretend the scar from that night has completely healed. Because it hasn't. Some nights, I still hear you say, I'd die broke and forgotten. And it still stings, even now, even with everything that's happened since. I hold her gaze. Love isn't a fairy tale, Hannah. It doesn't erase itself clean just because the ending changes. She nods slowly, blinking back tears, bracing herself for whatever comes next. But, I continue, reaching into my jacket pocket, I also can't ignore what I've watched over these past 2 months. The way you refused to weaponize our history when your parents demanded it. The letter you wrote and never asked anything in return for. The scar on your arm from a fight that wasn't even your responsibility to have. The stage you walked onto, knowing exactly how much it would cost you, because you decided the truth mattered more than protecting yourself. I pull out a small framed object and hold it out to her. A carefully preserved copy of the original HA blueprint, the same hand-drawn design from that rainy apartment 3 years ago, now protected behind glass, matted and framed like something worth preserving rather than something worth forgetting. Hannah takes it with both hands, staring down at the familiar lines and numbers, tears finally spilling freely down her cheeks. I kept the initials on the patent because some part of me never let go of what we were, I say. I'm not handing you this because I expect us to pick up exactly where we left off. I'm handing it to you because I think we're both different people now than we were that night. You, because you finally chose honesty over comfort, and me, because I finally stopped needing to prove anything to anyone but myself. So what happens now? She whispers, clutching the frame carefully against her chest. Now, I say, allowing myself for the first time in 3 years something close to a real smile. We take small steps, honest ones. No promises about forever, no rushing towards something neither of us has earned yet. Just 2 people sitting on a bench, deciding whether they want to try building something new together. Slowly, carefully, without any blueprints handed down from who we used to be. Hannah laughs softly through her tears, a real laugh this time, nothing like the one that broke my heart 3 years ago. That sounds terrifying. It is, I agree, settling back against the bench, watching the boats drift across the harbor in the late morning light. But some of the best things ever built start out that way. We sit there together in comfortable silence as the tide moves steadily beneath us, 2 people no longer running from the past, finally brave enough to face whatever comes next.